oh, we were scared they were going to give us the China virus. So don't you think his rhetoric is polarizing and, I'm not going to say hateful, but polarizing and purposefully so? It hurts American culture and it stops people from engaging faithfully across the aisle.
Okay.
But why?
We'll give you an answer. But again, I have to start. I actually want to answer your actual question. But before I answer your actual question, I have to again flip it and reverse it and say to you, like literally every single day, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, you name it, are going on television now, and it's ramping up more and more and more, telling people that Donald Trump is a tyrant, a dictator, Hitler. That is inflammatory rhetoric that has actually led to him being shot, and an attempt to try to murder him. And we have now found another attempted assassin in the bushes outside of his home. I don't know the full story of what happened with this latest thing. It sounds like it wasn't an assassination attempt, but I mean, why are we not talking about that inflammatory rhetoric, which has actually led to attempts to murder this political candidate? Now to answer your actual question. Many people have reported that that's what they witnessed in Ohio. When did we determine that that didn't happen? No, go ahead, please, I'd like to hear from you.
I think so. If you look at the facts, there was like maybe one recorded case of that happening. He made a vast generalization, and also, I'm sorry, but you asked me a question right about why aren't we talking about the left's rhetoric about it.
To be clear, he also didn't say Haitians. He said they're eating the cats.
Yes, and he named a specific city and the immigrants in that city.
He did not name the immigrants in the city.
He didn't name the immigrants, but he named the city.
The cats and dogs.
Yeah, and that, I mean, there's obviously implication. It's a very obvious implication. It's not hard to decipher what he meant. And the uptick in violence is obviously because people, correctly assume that that was the implication in a statement.
But can I ask about the uptick in violence and what is it?
Right.
Well, so there have been, there's been more hate crimes against Haitian immigrants in, I don't remember the name of the city, but
Springfield.
In Springfield, Ohio. And there have been recorded hate crimes. You can look it up.
And it says who, the FBI on Twitter?
Right, and
I'm sorry, if you don't trust the FBI, like what institution do you have that? Whose word are you willing
first
to?
of all, we do not reporting to the FBI is voluntary. And we're missing data from LA, from New York, from the most populous states, the most populous cities. It is voluntary.
Well, but we're talking about one specific
has admitted
city,
that.
though.
Secondly, the crimes against Asians were majority done by Black Americans. And that has been a long-standing issue. I know you're looking at me like that because the media painted it as a bunch of white conservatives who were freaked out about coronavirus. But in fact, it's uncomfortable to talk about, but there's been a long-standing issue between Asian Americans and Black Americans. And that has been there for a long time before COVID, and I don't want anyone to be harmed. But to blame that on Donald Trump, I think is a bridge too far, especially when the rhetoric has been heightened for a very long time. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know about any heightened crime against Haitians, and that's not what I want, but I also think that words have power, absolutely, but so do policies. We have Americans suffering because we have let in everybody, and we've called everybody a refugee, and regardless of their status, and we have not vetted people. And so, do I think that Americans should be committing violence at all against someone because they think they might be this or that? Absolutely not. But this is part of what I was talking about earlier. A secure border is humane for the people on the other side of the border and for us. And unfortunately, you are inviting that because we'll never get rid of sin. We'll never get rid of racism in the individual. We can only have legislation that, doesn't discriminate. That's all we can do. We cannot get rid of the hate in people's hearts overwhelmingly. But when you have these policies that are impacting Americans and everything is heightened up and people can't afford stuff, and then, we are letting in people. We do have 300,000 children who've gone missing at the border and are probably sexually trafficked. Stuff happens. And I think blaming that on Donald Trump saying they're eating the cats and dogs, which is kind of a silly thing to say, but just they're eating the cats and dogs, I personally find that absurd. I think Trump is the scapegoat for everything. I appreciate your question, but I think he's a scapegoat.
I'm not saying, we can talk about, immigration policies, but my point is, you can say we want to shut down the border, you can say, we should stop letting immigrants in, and that's okay, that's a policy discussion, and we can talk about that. My point is that there are already immigrants in America, and Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric makes it worse for those people because the people who go out and commit crimes whose violence has been harnessed by Trump's rhetoric.
But it's an issue when we let in. But it is an issue when we let in people who the Haitians were let in as refugees, It's an issue when we let in people who do not assimilate, who have but no matter what the color is, that is an issue. And Haitians do eat different animals. And he said they're eating the cats and dogs. I have no idea whether Haitians in America, in Springfield, Ohio, are eating people's pets. But some people have reported this, and we just completely, I don't want violence, but why does the media immediately shut it down that this might be happening when we have let in millions of people and we don't vet them, we don't have them assimilate?
Well,
we don't
again,
have
see,
them
the
do anything.
problem is you keep talking about a policy issue, and I'm talking about his rhetoric. So
Because
you can
policies
say,
matter.
No, you
Okay.
can say we want to shut down the border, but when he says things like, immigrants are stealing everyone's jobs, they're going to come in and
He's
they're
never
gonna,
said that. First of all,
he did say
he's never
during the
said
debate.
that.
He did say
I'm
that.
sure Rachel
He said
Maddow
immigrants are
told you he
stealing
said that,
American
but he never
jobs.
said that.
He verbatim said immigrants are stealing American jobs.
He said what?
Immigrants are stealing American jobs.
He said they're taking black jobs.
They are stealing American
They
jobs.
are.
Well, I'm sorry, but
Not stealing anything, they're just being hired over.
Black Americans are the first and the most impacted by illegal immigration because, and the left will tell you this, the left will tell you that black Americans are the ones who are at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. They'll just claim that all the time. Well, when you're working a minimum wage job and then someone else comes in and will do it for less and do it under the table and do it for longer hours and doesn't know what his or her rights are and is not a citizen, well then the people who are going to be priced out of jobs quickest are unfortunately predominantly black men. So again, we're talking about these policies where the left claims to be for these people, but their policies harm these people. And it's all under this veil of compassion. And so personally, I would rather have a man who maybe misspeaks sometimes and says, oh, they're eating the cats and dogs, but has good policies because these policies are actually harming people. And 100% black Americans' jobs are being, all of our jobs are, but black Americans are. And that matters. That is a fact. That is a fact.
That's not my-
And black economists will tell you that too.
I'm not disagreeing with the facts. I'm making a different argument, and you refuse to address what I'm saying.
I've addressed your point that words do matter, and there's always room for people to be more careful with their words. But he said they're eating the cats and dogs.
Well, that's not the only thing. When he kept calling this China virus, there was an uptick in violence against Asian
The
Americans.
virus came
who?
from China, and
Huh?
that came
That's
from.
you're right.
It doesn't matter.
I want to ask.
It
I'm
absolutely
sorry.
matters.
I want to ask about this mystery violence that you keep talking about because this is really remarkable to me. Because the left has been so desperate to show Trump supporter violence for 8 years that they've literally had to make up hate crime hoaxes. Everyone had the biggest hard on when Jussie Smollett told them that he was attacked by Trump supporters when he got his Subway sandwich, and it turned out to be a lie. If Haitian migrants were being attacked by MAGA people, we would be watching it on a 24-hour loop on CNN every single day. So what are you talking about? You don't get to just say like, oh, this terrible thing is happening because of
Well,
Trump.
I'm saying
Where's
you can,
the evidence?
You can look at the statistics. Okay, so if you look at the statistics from 2021, I believe, you look at the crime statistics in large cities, because Trump kept calling it the China virus, there was an increase in the homicide of Asian people, specifically Asian women, right? And now you can say, oh, those two things were unrelated. Oh, it was a pre-existing issue. And sure, that of course Asian people were killed before that as well. But there was an increase in those homicides because of his rhetoric.
Do you
and
think
because
that
of the
maybe
way.
that had to do with people being forced to stay home? People like the story I just told.
I
you.
think
Not
that-
that
I think
that's a
pe-
reason to
I
do
think people
violence,
were-
but wasn't violence kind of heightened? So again,
I think
how-
people were frustrated because they were
Right.
staying home, and when Trump said China virus, they found an outlet for their violence through his rhetoric. I think that's what happened. They were absolutely frustrated.
Okay, could I ask you? Okay, so you're talking about like the statistics of who was harmed or assaulted or killed or
The
whatever.
homicides, yes.
Homicides. Okay, great. So like, do we know who committed the homicides? Because do you remember what else was going on in 2020?
Yes, there were protests going on. I remember.
Protests.
Sure.
Protests. Really? Yeah.
No, but that wasn't the homicides that happened did not happen at the protest. You can go look at the data. Like I mean,
I don't have to look at the data. I watch the videos every day on social media of the most heinous violence that's ever taken place in this country. Thousands of people were injured, dozens of people were killed. I mean, this idea that a bunch of white people in MAGA hats were
I
going
didn't
to
say it
beating
was white
Asian
people. I
women.
never said it was white people. I just said homicides of
Inspired
Asian
by
people.
Trump.
Inspired by Trump. Yes.
Well, do you hold yourself to your same standard though? When in 2020 people were getting killed and harmed and their businesses burned down in the BLM riots, when all these Democrat politicians were bailing them out, were telling them don't let up, keep protesting in the middle of riots. Is
Well,
there
so
any
I-
responsibility on them?
Absolutely,
for
and
that?
I think there's absolutely a right to peaceful protest, but people who go and loot and burn down stores in protest should also be arrested.
No, but I'm saying
I agree
you're
with you
you're
there.
talking about Trump's rhetoric
The
and
rhetoric.
not saying anything about their rhetoric that is having actual violence and actual real world input when it's the point that people are shooting at Trump now.
Well, okay, the guy who shot at Trump wasn't affiliated, well, he wasn't registered with either party.
Clearly, he hated Donald Trump. I think we can agree with that, right?
Yeah,
The
but
man
that doesn't
hated
make
Donald
him,
Trump.
like, okay,
He
yes, he
donated
hated
to
Donald
the
Trump.
Democrat
You don't know anything about him. Like,
I know that he hated Donald Trump, and it was unjustified.
well, I wouldn't say it was
I know that.
unjustified that he hated Donald Trump.
Well, it was unjustified that he shot him.
Absolutely,
And the
it was
reason
unjustified that
he
he-
hated him was based off of lies for 10 years.
How do you know that it was based on, have you talked to him? How do you know?
Because it's all lies.
That's just not true.
It's all lies. There's no reason to hate someone to that level.
I don't
It's
think
all
he
lies.
should have shot him, but I don't think it's unjust
But-
to hate Donald Trump.
But
Oh, well,
You
to the
just
point of.
asked, did you talk to him, did you talk to know why he was motivated or whatever that you said?
Mhm.
But you were just implying that there was an increase in Haitian crimes.
That's a
and
statistic.
that his rhetoric motivated them. Did you talk to these
Yes,
people?
because they have come out and made statements that said, you know, Trump said that it was the China virus. We were scared we were going to get the China virus, so we killed these people. There have been documented cases of that. Huh? I'm not that sure about the Haitian stuff, but for the Asian stuff, I definitely am sure that happened.
Can I say something? First, like if you want to say that Trump inspired someone to kill Asian, you have to prove that C, prove A, prove B. If you can't prove that a person like Trump inspired those people to hate and to kill those people, you don't have evidence to that. If you can say, you can make like the day Trump say about that, and then after that it's increased, really increased. You can prove that, but you didn't have like any statistic to show that Trump inspired those people or those people do by themselves. So you are unreasonable and uneconomically ruthless.
Aaron, go ahead.
It was more of a comment, not a question, but I'm sure it's uncomfortable for someone to ask a question and then be in a room where most people don't think like you. And so I also want, there are always multiple sides to an argument, and I think it's important that every opinion is welcome and that, there's always, I don't want you, for example, to feel like you're being jumped on, because I'm sure that most people here have been in situations where everyone else is jumping on them. So I want to make sure that
Thank you.
it's brave of you to voice your opinion,
Thank
and I
you.
think there's multiple ways of looking at things. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
I have a question. First of all, I absolutely agree with what you said. That's a 100% true statement. Second of all, have you guys seen Jimmy Kimmel, where they ask people on the street where Alaska is, or what the state is, and it's Florida or something, and they won't get it. It's the same thing as what you guys are tabling, in my opinion. When you tabled, you're fielding like the most moronic people on this campus. And there are some stupid people here, like who someone mentioned the admission problem. And like you have to realize that. So I think if you're not open-minded enough to accept other opinions, from Aristotle quote that I'm paraphrasing, then you really aren't that smart. So Mr. Straka, you had a very powerful anecdote about your friends and how they effectively left you once you voiced your opinion.
Yep.
I think they're pretty stupid for that. Honestly, in all due respect, I think they're pretty stupid. I think they're morons. But in the same light, I'm actually relatively liberal. I have pretty liberal friends, but I'm from Florida. So I have friends who go from liberal, but all the way to, oh, Hitler could have done it better. So I have like a pretty wide range of people that I talk to, yet they're able to talk to each other. And that's what I always valued about my friend group. So maybe you just have to look for people. I agree with you, Sid, as well. You're getting people who just won't change their mind. But there are people who will change their mind, and you really have to be confident about that. So that's my main issue now, is how can you say that the entire Democrat Party is this? Or even generalize to most Democrats? Because I feel like, you gave your anecdote, I'm giving you my anecdote. I have an anecdote of a lot of friends who are very willing to voice their opinions, but still manage to talk peacefully about it. It's about trans rights, about gay rights, about gun rights, about so many things. It doesn't make sense to generalize to every person, just like you cannot faithfully generalize to all Republicans. It's just, there's so many different varying levels of people, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I understand that, but I mean, you have to understand, how old are you?
I'm a freshman, I'm 18.
Well,
We're all-
I thought you were, see, I'm like that age now where I can't tell if you're 12 or 25. No, I mean, you have to keep in mind that, you know, again, we were all Democrats and for a very long time, and so I think that we watched the party trend in a certain direction more and more and more, and at a certain point it became intolerable and too extreme for us, so obviously we had to leave it. We felt like it was beyond repair and beyond recognition. But to say, I mean, your question is like, how can you generalize like that? Well, I mean, obviously it's hyperbolic to say everybody's like this or the entire party is like this. But I think we've all watched the party head in one particular direction and go further and go further and go further. And at a certain point, if you're not willing to jump off the train like we have, then you're supporting the train. And you're supporting the train as it heads in that direction. And that direction is towards extremism and destruction. So, you know, look, if you haven't gotten it yet, great. You know, obviously we wouldn't be doing what we're doing if we thought that people were beyond saving or beyond redemption. Like, I think that anyone can wake up and think for themselves. And obviously we encourage that. But no, I'm not going to give anybody any, you know, awards or a ribbon for continuing to support this party when it seems so glaringly obvious to me at this point what they've become and where they're taking our country.
I don't think any of us have necessarily, maybe some of us misspoke, you know, which happens, okay, Donald Trump does it too. I don't think any of us have necessarily said all Democrats are this way. In fact, I think earlier, while I may have been someone who misspoke, I think I said that the majority of people today were not the craziest of the craziest. So of course that means that all Democrats aren't this way. But there's an issue with the Democrat Party and the legacy media. I mean, when you think about it, every single institution, Hollywood, you know, all the educational institutions, everything is pushing you towards Democrat. And there's only one side that if you voice your opinion, you're more likely to get canceled, you're not going to get a job, specifically in Hollywood, but even in other places. That doesn't happen with Democrats. So I don't think that the average American Democrat is evil, but I do think every single American Democrat is woefully misinformed. And I think the people at the top are manipulating us. But I don't think every Democrat is like not gonna listen and can't and gonna just call me a racist. But that has unfortunately been a lot of our experience of losing a lot of our friends. But I don't think that every American Democrat, just your average everyday Joe, is evil. But I think he's misinformed. Even if he can have these conversations, which I think is really special that you have that, I think they're very, very misinformed. And they are unfortunately promoting a really awful agenda, you know, so hopefully those conversations take root.
Can I just also add, I think, because someone asked me today, they were like, why are you here? And I asked her, I said, do college kids not vote? You know, because you guys are gonna get jobs, you're gonna vote for the leaders of this country, and so even if, as you said, there are some moronic people on this campus, these people are still gonna hold positions of influence and power someday. So even if we don't change their mind, at least we can plant a seed, because what I have noticed, and again, not a generalized thing, all of my family are still Democrats, right? And so, but what I've noticed is that a lot of people who associate with being a Democrat, is they don't work through their ideas to consider the long-term consequences of those ideas. They think for the immediate gratification, and they don't consider what is this gonna look like when we take this to its logical conclusion. You know, like the whole transing thing. Like, why are we having this discussion about kids being trans? Where did that ideology come from? And by the way, there's roots for where that ideology came from. It starts with Darwinism, so that's a fun thing to look up. But I think it's important for us to have these conversations. Even if they don't agree, maybe they'll think about it years down the line.
I think for me, it's not about each individual Democrat voter, it's about the power structure, the people in power, that maybe not every Democrat voter agrees with these things, but the media is in lockstep, the party is in lockstep. And I used to be a lot more tolerant. I used to be one of these people who's like, I don't care what anyone's politics are, I'll be friends with whoever. And that's who I want to be, but it got a lot harder when I was segregated. It got a lot harder when I didn't want to take a vaccine that I knew I didn't need, that I knew was not safe or effective, and I lost everything for it. I lost my job, I couldn't get the apartment I was gonna get, couldn't go anywhere. And it was a lot harder to, in the city that I was born in and lived my entire life in and thought I would never leave. It was a very tough pill to
And
swallow.
that is another thing about rhetoric. I know that, people have left, but that's another thing about rhetoric. I mean, remember them telling us that this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
Mhm.
So, I mean, is there room for every single human on either side of the aisle, Trump included, because he's just a regular man and not God, to hone your rhetoric? Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you're talking that much, you're going to misstep and that kind of thing. And Trump certainly, he's just himself. I get that. But that's why I am focused on policies, because absolutely there's critiques on both sides about the rhetoric. And I think more so on a certain side is what I would argue. And we don't talk about that, what happened to unvaccinated people, what happened. We have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris calling them extreme MAGA. And, he's Hitler and that kind of thing. So we could all pinpoint tit for tat. And I think that's maybe a worthy conversation, because to be more specific with your language. But again, the policies are what matter. The policies are what's harming people, because I really don't think that people are just hearing something and then going out and, necessarily committing violence. That's why I'm focused on the policies, because look at what happened to you, what happened to everyone up here, and the way they spoke about the unvaccinated or MAGA voters, etc.
Yeah, and before we go to the next question, I just wanted to address one thing you said too, when you were saying you think my friends are stupid for turning their backs on me. Look, I'm going to generalize again, so you're probably going to hate this. I often say that I think that the more educated a liberal is, the more indoctrinated they are. I actually didn't go to college at all. I only have a high school graduation. I do actually think that that's highly instrumental in why I was able to see the truth and walk away, because I got it really early on. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back or, like I'm no great genius or anything, but like there are still people much smarter than me and much more educated than me that have stayed on the Trump hate train. And a lot of it is tied to their arrogance and their belief that their education somehow elevates them above other people, and that the indoctrination that they received in their university or their college, that they know something that the rest of us do not. And a lot of my friends at that time, I was living in New York City, I think I was the only person in my friend group who didn't have a college education, but the majority of them were PhDs, had master's degrees, highly educated people. But I have found that oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, the more educated somebody is, the more resistant they are to changing their mind. And that if you actually have less education, you sometimes tend to be more open-minded and willing to change. And so I just wanted to point that out, because my friends are actually not stupid. They were really, really, really smart. They were just, I think, arrogant and unwilling to accept that somebody could change or that they could be wrong. Yeah. Yes, sir. We'll go to you next. I know you're
Yeah, no
waiting.
issues.
Yeah, we'll go to you.
So I think I've heard from some of you guys.
Stand up.
Oh, stand up. I think I've heard from some of you guys, like a dislike for an echo chamber, or maybe even like hyper partisanship, or like the idea that if I'm a Democrat and I believe something that's not traditionally Democrat, that's maybe going to cause me to get kicked out of this. That's something all of you have said. In the spirit of reducing polarization, which I think is important, I believe you guys might agree, what are some things that I'm hoping to hear each of you, that either specific policy things that you guys disagree either with the general Republican or Democrat, the general Republican status quo, or agree with the Democrat status quo, or disagree with amongst yourselves, which I think
We
will
disagree
help.
on a lot.
Yeah, just
Well,
one or a
actually.
few.
Yeah, who wants to go first?
Well, I will say, I actually spoke with some students about this earlier. I personally, I'm torn on healthcare. I see both sides of the healthcare debate as someone who comes from a family that cannot afford healthcare, including aging parents. And so while I think socialized medicine is no bueno, I also feel like it's really bad when you can't just afford to go like treat your broken arm or something like that. So, I mean, maybe I'm a little bit different than, I don't know if I consider myself a Republican. Obviously I'm a Trump supporter and a conservative, but I guess maybe I'm slightly different than Republicans in that way, to answer your question.